Meanwhile, on the other side of Capitol Hill, in the House of Representatives, efforts continue there as well to inject more oversight into the NSA's surveillance programs and the top-secret FISA court. One of those members of Congress leading the effort is Adam Schiff from California. He joined me earlier, and I asked him how his reforms to the FISA court will protect America's First and Fourth Amendment rights.
Well, I think they'll have the cumulative impact of making the FISA court much more transparent, so the American people can understand what's being done in their name, in the name of national security, so that we can have a more informed debate over the balance between privacy and security. I think this can be accomplished while also maintaining sources and methods and not compromising some of the very real national security concerns at stake. It also will mean, in terms of the appointment of FISA judges, a more diverse set of judges than those that were chosen by the Chief Justice alone. It'll mean that American people, during that vetting process of Senate confirmation, have a better sense of where those judges stand on Fourth Amendment issues. It will mean that through the declassification of opinions, we get a sense more of the constitutional principles involved and how the courts are interpreting provisions of law. And then finally, I think that the opinions themselves will benefit by having an adversarial process in key cases where the court has the benefit of hearing the other side, of seeing opposing case law. So all of these, I think, will improve public confidence in the system and can be accomplished without compromising national security.
Last week, this program interviewed one of your colleagues, Congressman Rush Holt. He's introduced legislation to repeal the Patriot Act as well as the FISA Amendments Act. And Congressman Holt said that when he served on the Intelligence Committee in 2005, he asked about domestic surveillance, and he said that he was deceived by the NSA director at the time to the extent of which the surveillance was being conducted on American citizens. You're a member of the Intelligence Committees. Do you think that these agencies have been completely truthful with you and others on the committee about what's going on?
You know, I think that by and large, the members of the Intelligence Committee, both that have come in and testified and that work in the various agencies, are dedicated, honest people. They're doing a job that they've been assigned to do, and many of them have had a lot of success in terms of protecting the country. I haven't seen evidence in the years that I've been on the committee of any intention to mislead, any malicious manipulation of these programs for nefarious purposes, either to gain the content of communications when that wasn't authorized. So we can have a debate over whether the agency should have this authority. We can have a debate over how we ought to reform the FISA court in the process. But I haven't seen the evidence of malice, so I wouldn't make that same claim.
Right. As a member of the Intelligence Committee, you're privy to a lot of information that other members aren't and that the general public isn't privy to. If you get information about domestic programs that you're uncomfortable with, how do you go about talking about that or doing something about that or informing your constituents that they should be concerned about something when you're sworn to classified information?
Well, there are two real challenges as a member of the Intelligence Committee. The one is the one you've mentioned, which is it's very hard to discuss these issues with your constituents or others when they're classified and can only be discussed in a classified setting with people who are cleared. So that is certainly one challenge. There's another challenge I would point to as well, and that is that institutionally the members of Congress are at a great disadvantage in the sense that we don't have any kind of the resources to investigate some of these questions that the intelligence community does. So we see, in essence, what the Intelligence Committee wants us to see, and sometimes it's hard to know the questions to ask when you don't have an equivalent resource at your beck and call in Congress as the Intelligence Community does. All that being said, we've got to do the best we can. We've got to raise these issues in committee. We can raise these issues outside the committee in select ways. But it is a challenge, and some of that is a necessary challenge because a lot of the work simply has to be classified. But there's a substantial degree to which we can declassify things that won't impair national security, that will allow a more full debate, that will allow better momentum behind reform, and that's what I'm trying to do with these FISA court bills.
Last week, you, as well as lots of other Democrats and lots of Tea Party Republicans, supported the Amash-Conyers Amendment, which would have defunded the NSA's collection of data on American citizens under Section 215 of the Patriot Act. And it cobbled together an interesting coalition of progressives and somewhat libertarian Republicans. What do you make of this new coalition? And moving forward, what can this sort of coalition accomplish in other areas? For example, you're trying to repeal the AUMF. Is that something that you can kind of use this same coalition to push forward?
Well, you know, there was an interesting coalition that gathered in support of the Amash Amendment, and it was very difficult to divine where people were going to come down on that until you saw the votes go up on the board. I think that high vote total, though, was very important in moving towards a restructuring of the NSA program, something that I've been urging for some time. In my view, there's no reason why the telecommunications companies can't retain their own data, and then we would only go to the companies when it was necessary, when we had reasonable, articulable facts supporting a number that was associated with terrorism, rather than the government taking hold of all that metadata. So I think that vote will help propel that structural change in the program. But yes, there's a coalition that is looking at a lot of the national security issues, a lot of the so-called war on terror issues, including the authorization to use military force. Many of us on both sides of the aisle feel that that authorization now no longer really accurately describes the nature of the threat that we're confronting. It's used as a basis to use force against organizations that may not have even been in existence on 9/11. So we want to set a sunset at the end of 2014 when we draw down our troops in Afghanistan. It may be that that will need to be followed by a subsequent authorization, a more narrowly tailored authorization. But my concern is, without a hard deadline, we'll simply punt this issue, as Congress does on so many other items of difficulty but of great significance.
One more question, Congressman. Given that this entire discussion, as well as last week's vote on the Amash Amendment, the legislation you've proposed, the hearings that we've had on these issues, given that all of this wouldn't have been possible without Edward Snowden and his leaks, what should you and other members of Congress make of him?
Well, you know, we don't condone and can't condone people deciding for themselves what to declassify. That would not allow us to have any kind of a national security system. So I think we have to take that very seriously, just as we took the Manning case very seriously. You know, we need to find other mechanisms to raise these issues. I think bringing more transparency to the FISA court will allow us to do that. But we don't want to rely on people to become, you know, to basically decide for themselves, because everyone's going to have a different judgment about where the line ought to be drawn. So I think we have to condemn these leaks, take them very seriously, and find a better way to raise these substantive issues.
And at the same time, use them to try and reform how the NSA works. Congressman Adam Schiff, representing California's 28th District, thank you so much for coming on.
You bet. Thank you.